Sarah, what do you have for us on Mina Kimes' commentary?
Yeah, so this was interesting. Because I think there's part there's a lot going on here that I'm gonna have to clarify because people were claiming these stats were incorrect and they actually are. But let's start from the beginning here. With Mina Kimes, she put up a post that was talking about the tush push, so it had nothing to do with the topic we're about to have. But what I'm assuming is a Bengals fan says thoughts and then tags Mina Kimes. He says, "You're always talking about how Burrow benefits the most from Chase and Higgins, but isn't football an 11-man sport, meaning on each side? I'm confused." He says, "Who benefits most from their teammates?" And then he puts up this graphic, which was created by Joe Goodberry, who is a Bengals fan, and I think he's a Bengals content creator. And a while ago, he made this graphic. He's had Lamar's teammates, Allen's teammates, and Burrow's teammates, and how many All-Pros and Pro Bowlers each guy has had with them. And Lamar doubles the All-Pros and Pro Bowls of Josh Allen. And what is this? A quadruple All-Pros of what Burrow has had, and almost a quadruple of his Pro Bowlers. So Lamar, he's got listed here of 21 All-Pros and 45 Pro Bowlers. Then Allen has had 12 All-Pros and 22 Pro Bowlers. I shouldn't say Pro Bowlers. I should say All-Pros and Pro Bowls, because some of these guys repeat. Okay. And then Burrow's teammates have had 5 All-Pros and 9 Pro Bowls. Okay. Now, before I get to Mina Kimes, I just want to say this. A lot of people were accusing, and I thought they were correct, that Joe Goodberry was using anybody that had a Pro Bowl and played with Lamar but didn't have a Pro Bowl with Lamar. That is actually incorrect. And I'm using Spenny here, Spencer, just because I thought he was correct too. So I was wrong too. So I just want to make sure it's clear. He put 2021 Des Bryant counts the same as 2025 Jamar Chase. This is objectively good analysis. Good job, with the clappy emoji, basically being sarcastic. And so Goodberry starts noticing everybody's using this graphic because he had used it a while back. He had made it a while back. And he said, this is why these graphics can do more damage when they're out of control. He said, I appreciate the eyes on the final discrepancy, but this was a response, and there was a reason we were comparing All-Pro and Pro Bowl players. He says it didn't count players from previous years before the QB started. We use these awards specifically because of what somebody had asked. And later he explains that they were just comparing overall supporting cast, both on offense, defense, and special teams, and not weapons. Okay. So I went and looked it all up just to make sure the numbers were correct. And it is true that there have been 45 Pro Bowls of teammates from 2019 to 2024 while playing with Lamar. So I have them listed out here. So that is true. The Ravens had 9 Pro Bowlers last year, which was the most in the NFL. Okay. So I'm going to come back to this list in just a minute, because here was Mina Kimes' points. She did not deny that they were miscounting the numbers, because she's correct that the numbers are correct. Okay. He did have 21 All-Pros and 45 Pro Bowls. Okay. So, but what she says here is she responds to Michael, who sent her this graphic, and said, I don't think a system that gives the same level of significance to Jamar Chase and Patrick Ricard, and in parentheses, a great player, is a useful way to evaluate quarterback context. Your thoughts on that, Bobby? Is this a useful way to evaluate quarterback context by going through All-Pros and Pro Bowls?
I love it. I love the Mina response. Don't love it for Pat, and she meant no malice by it. But it's essentially saying, look, that her analogy is basically saying, do you guys really think that Jamar Chase being viewed as an All-Pro, and deservedly so, is the same type of value to his team as it is that Patrick Ricard is to Baltimore as an All-Pro at his position at fullback? So it's valid. It's a valid way of responding to this. It needs much more context. And we haven't even mentioned the idea of the Lamar effect being a part of this.
Correct. And
Right?
how about a winning effect?
Correct. And so that to me is perhaps the greatest testament to Lamar is that last year, the Derrick Henry conversation went national in large part due to the presence of his running mate. It was the Kobe and Shaq duo and comparison for a reason. And so while it's hard to measure truly how many of these 21 All-Pros and 45 Pro Bowlers were named as such due to Lamar's impact, it's a part of the story, and it's absolutely a part of his overall value, which obviously knows no bounds. So love it from Mina. I think it's a great way of summarizing it up very quickly and in layman's terms.
Yes, I think, yes, totally agree with what you just said. Great way to put it in layman's terms and quickly to talk about it. Now, the chat is now going off, and I think that they're pointing out some context that I'm about to, because I think it's all valid. Now, before I do that context, let me make something clear. I am not going to be a Bills fan or a Bills content creator that constantly put down people like Cook, their running back, who had well over 1,000 yards, who played well, who didn't get all the touchdowns that he could have had, but they, had Josh Allen running it in, all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to start poo-pooing Lamar Jackson's teammates. Let's make that clear. I think Lamar Jackson and his teammates were great, especially during the regular season, and have been since 2019. That being said, I agree with Mina that positional value is important. Okay? Here's the other thing that's important. The point that they want to make, because they go on later, let me just point this out. Goodberry later says, yeah, this was a conversation about franchises and how they're better at stacking talent. I think that the Ravens have a better overall roster than the Bengals. I think that's true. I think Burrow has better weapons. For sure, he has better weapons, but I do think the Ravens have a better overall roster. I also think that the Ravens have consistently had, I mean, I didn't go into the numbers, but I think the Ravens are usually like a top 5 since 2019. I feel like the Ravens have fielded a top 5 roster. Again, that's not weapons. Lamar has not had the best weapons, but he has had a better roster than the Bengals, in my opinion. Okay, so I agree with that part of Goodberry. But then you start digging in more, and then you see what he is really trying to say. He's saying, so why don't these teams just admit their teams have more talent? And he says, because if they admit it, then they might come to the realization that if they had Burrow, they'd have a ring by now. No, now that part I don't agree with. That part I don't agree with. And that's why you do need to have this context that I'm about to talk about. First of all, Lamar Jackson finished injured in 2022 and 2021. So what does it matter, the Pro Bowlers that came out that year? Because you can't hold that against him into the playoffs. You certainly can't hold him against him and not getting a ring those 2 years. He finished injured. Burrow has finished injured a few years. Okay. That's number one. Number two, the positional value. Are we going to say that Patrick Ricard is as important as Jamar Chase, as you and Mina have pointed out? Heck no, nobody would. How about Devin Duvernay as a returner? Not as a receiver, but as a returner. How about Tyler Huntley? When does this matter that he was a Pro Bowler? Are we going to use that against Lamar? How about your long snapper and Morgan Cox, right? So if you start thinking about it in those terms, and we're talking about Pro Bowls that actually helped Lamar, then you have to take off a good 15 between the years that he's injured, and then you take off 11 for the years that he was injured, and then you got to really look at the positional value of Tyler Huntley and Morgan Cox and Patrick Ricard, maybe Justin Tucker, maybe that matters. We saw what happened, how it hurt the Ravens yesterday when he kept missing, or last year when he kept missing kicks. But that's why all this context is indeed important.
Oh, heck, you can even throw Devin Duvernay into that conversation, not to throw a stray at him, but as primarily a return specialist the year that he was named All-Pro. That's a small sample size. Yeah, I get it. That has it's a big impact in flipping the field positioning, so on and so forth. And I'm pretty sure the year that he was All-Pro, didn't he take one to the house? Wasn't that the year that he took the Kansas City one to the house? Not sure if memory's serving me on that one, but clearly he was a top-level, top-flight return specialist, but somebody that was a role player offensively. So there has to be an asterisk around that too.
Right. And here's the second point of this all. Or I guess there's two more points. You mentioned it. Like, you're not going to get Pro Bowlers if you're not winning. And the Bengals continually, under the leadership of Joe Burrow, start slow. And they didn't make the playoffs last year. They were barely over 500. You're not going to get It's the same thing with MVP. That's why he didn't win MVP. He played well. He had the stats. But if your stats don't translate to you having a winning record for the majority of the season, you're not going to win MVP. You're not going to get Pro Bowls. You're not going to get all pros. That's how this works, unless you have insane gaudy statistics like a Jamar Chase that it's like, well, even though they're losing, of course he's a Pro Bowler, you know? So that's number one. Here's number two. These are regular season awards. You can't take these regular season awards and then apply Lamar not winning a ring. It's the same thing with the MVP. So what they do is they'll say, oh, Lamar's great in the regular season, but he's terrible in the postseason. Okay, they do that. But why don't you talk about all these all pros and these Pro Bowlers and how they're great in the regular season, but then also fall apart in the postseason? Lamar's performances dip in the postseason. Yes, we just went through those stats a couple days ago, even though he's been much better lately. Okay. But if you're going to call out Lamar dipping in the postseason, you have to call out all these Pro Bowlers dipping in the postseason. NFL Live just talked about this again. What is it that the Ravens have to do to go on and win a Super Bowl? Here's what they said, and it is 100% true.
Get over the hump. You know, it was all there for them last year. The Chiefs weren't the same mighty Chiefs offensively they'd been in the past. The Bills were a team that the Ravens absolutely blew out on a Sunday night earlier in the season. And they get to the playoffs, and of course they get that opportunity, and they go to Buffalo. And whereas Lamar Jackson had been flawless the last several months of the season, there was 2 bad picks in the first half. And then Mark Andrews, who's been Mr. Reliable his entire career with Baltimore, drops 2 big passes, including the potential game-leading 2-point conversion at the end. A heartbreaking finish, but that's been too much the norm under Harbaugh over the last few years. So now you've got Lamar Jackson, who was this young, up-and-coming quarterback, now nearing 30, and then the other end of 30 coming with, wait a second, are these the best years of Lamar Jackson and the best team we're going to be able to field based on contracts and salary cap and everything else that happens in this league? Gosh, to me, if I'm the Ravens, I'm looking on paper and I'm saying Eric DeCosta has built the best team of football on paper. Lamar Jackson's been as good as any quarterback in the NFL the past several seasons. And, you know, we don't have a Super Bowl appearance to show for it. So you can't control crazy things like L'Jarius Sneed knocking a ball out of Zay Flowers' hands or Mark Andrews dropping passes. Yet at some point, you're not going to get those opportunities every season. You got to capitalize on those moments, and they just haven't the past few years.
And I completely agree. And the reason why they haven't capitalized on those moments is because their best players haven't played at their best in those big moments. You talk about Mark Andrews.
Can we just repeat that again? Their best players, plural, have not played their best in the postseason. That's exactly it. Their best players, plural.
Andrews, Lamar Jackson. You talk about a defense that has been subpar from a passing standpoint the last couple of years. It's really simple, guys. If you look at the teams that have won, look at the Philadelphia Eagles. Their offensive line is Saquon Barkley carried today in the postseason. And Jalen Hurts did what he normally does, but their best players showed up. When the Kansas City Chiefs win, Patrick Mahomes shows up and shows out in the postseason. Your best players have to show up at the most crucial times. We often talk about superstars when they're made. They're not made in the regular season. They're made in the postseason. We're watching that right now with the NBA. What's the difference? The big-time players show up in the biggest moments. And Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry and those guys on the offensive side of the football, they have been outstanding during the regular season the last couple of years. They have got to do it when it counts the most. And to be honest, that's the last step. Like, you don't really need to go out and get more weapons, more offensive linemen. Like, you don't need a bunch of stuff. They have everything they need. Sometimes what you have needs to perform at its best on the.
That's it, Bobby. So I agree with Goodberry. Like, Lamar's had I think a better roster, not better weapons, but a better roster than the Bengals have had. That being said, that doesn't mean that like the ring is, or a lack of a ring is Lamar's fault. That is literally everybody. It's not a Lamar problem. It's a Ravens problem. And Lamar obviously is the quarterback, is the face of that. But it's like all these guys. And here we go again. We're going into 2025. Here's Fox Sports. They're ranking the Ravens with a number 8 roster. But look at number 4 for this season. So the expectations better be there. They got him at number 4.
How on earth do they have Cincy at 4?
I'm sure he's thinking of Jamar and Higgins.
How can that be after what the defensive side of the ball did to them last year? But
yeah,
that's peculiar.
But regardless, this is a Ravens problem from coaches to all players. Pick it up in the postseason.